The morning air felt heavier than usual as she approached her small wooden desk. She had been careful, placing the letters in their usual spot, each one containing thoughts, warnings, and secrets too delicate to speak aloud. But now the stack was gone. Panic rose in her chest, sudden and suffocating. Her hands trembled as she searched the surrounding drawers, under cushions, even beneath the floorboards, hoping that somehow she had mislaid them. Yet there was no mistake, the letters had vanished. Her mind raced through every possibility. Who could have taken them? What? The village, which usually moved with predictable rhythm, now seemed suffocatingly opaque. Every face she passed carried a flicker of suspicion in her mind. Neighbors exchanging glances, the old merchant closing his stall abruptly, children scattering as she approached, all became suspect. She felt eyes upon her even when none were there, her imagination magnifying the ordinary into potential betrayal. The letters were more than mere parchment, they were her voice, her thoughts made tangible. They carried confessions, warnings, and truths she had no one to share with directly. Losing them felt like losing a part of herself, a part that could now be twisted or used by someone who understood their power. Anxiety became a tangible weight, settling in her shoulders and pressing down with every passing moment. She retraced her steps over the previous days, trying to remember who had come near her home, who might have had the opportunity. Each encounter seemed innocent in retrospect, yet now each handshake, each smile, each passing comment was suspect. She noted small inconsistencies, a word misremembered, a glance held too long, a footprint that did not belong. The village that had seemed familiar had suddenly transformed into a maze of potential danger, every corner hiding a secret, every passerby a possible thief. Her thoughts circled endlessly around motives. Some letters contained warnings meant for the elders, others carried information about hidden misdeeds in the village. Could someone want to suppress the truth? Could they use it to manipulate her, to control her, or to endanger others? Each possibility heightened her fear, and yet, somewhere in the whirl of anxiety, a spark of determination emerged. She would find the letters. She would understand why they had been taken. By evening, a tense hush had settled over her home. The empty space where the letters once lay seemed to hum with silent accusation, as if the room itself demanded answers. Every shadow cast by the dim firelight now appeared as a silent observer, a witness to the theft, a reminder of the unseen forces at play. She resolved to remain vigilant, knowing that the path ahead would be uncertain, that trust would have to be carefully measured, and that the mystery of the missing letters was only the beginning. A few nights later, as the moon traced its pale arc across the sky, a small envelope appeared at her doorstep. She noticed it first because of its unnatural glow, faint and almost imperceptible, yet somehow different from anything she had seen before. The envelope was sealed tightly, the paper unfamiliar, smooth yet oddly textured, and marked with a symbol she did not recognize. Her heart quickened, a mixture of relief and foreboding twisting in her chest. Carefully she picked it up. There was a weight to it, not in mass but in presence, as if the envelope itself held intention. She could feel the echo of eyes watching her through the night, and instinctively knew that this was no ordinary delivery. Something had returned, deliberately and with purpose. The symbol etched upon it, a curling sigil that seemed almost alive, made her pulse race with unease. The village around her slept as though nothing had changed, yet she sensed the subtle disturbance in the air. The wind seemed to carry whispers, rustling leaves with faint, urgent murmurs, and the shadows cast by her home stretched unnaturally long, pointing toward the envelope as though urging her to heed caution. Every instinct she possessed screamed that the contents were dangerous, that opening it carelessly could unleash consequences beyond her comprehension. Still, curiosity gnawed at her. The envelope had returned to her alone, selected from the stolen collection, marked as if to signal that this particular message was different, urgent, and perilous. She traced the unfamiliar symbol with trembling fingers, feeling the faint hum of power emanating from it. There was a story hidden within, a warning encoded in lines and marks, waiting to be read. The questions crowded her mind. Who sent it back? Was it meant as a test, a threat, or a guide? And what secret did it contain that others had tried to hide or suppress? The air around her seemed to thicken, pressing against her senses, heightening her awareness of the subtle signs that had always been present but now screamed with urgency. The very walls of her home seemed to lean closer, listening, observing, amplifying the significance of this one returned envelope. She placed the envelope on her table, studying it carefully without breaking the seal. It demanded patience, attention, and respect. Every fold and crease seemed deliberate, every mark purposeful. She understood that the moment of opening it would change everything, but she also sensed that ignoring it would be equally dangerous. It was a beacon and a warning, an object imbued with a silent, urgent intelligence. Throughout the night she felt the village subtly shift. A distant dog barked sharply, a sudden gust of wind rattled a window, and the rustle of unseen footsteps made her startle. All around her, signs whispered of a hidden presence, a watchful observer connected to the envelope. Whoever had returned it had ensured that its arrival would be noticed, that she would feel the weight of its danger, and that she would understand the significance of the message it carried before she even opened it. By dawn she knew that this envelope was not merely a returned letter, it was a catalyst. Something hidden, dangerous, and transformative lay within, a secret that could alter the course of her life, the village, and the unseen forces entwined with both. The world around her held its breath, awaiting her next move, and she understood that the journey into the envelope's secret had already begun. The envelope felt heavier than its size warranted, as though it carried more than paper, as though the very air around it was laden with silent portent. She held it carefully, her fingers tracing the edges of the seal, aware that the slightest movement might awaken forces she did not yet understand. Finally, with a trembling hand she broke the seal. The flap lifted like a sigh, revealing a folded sheet of paper within. Its surface was smooth, almost too pristine, and covered in a script that twisted and flowed like wind-blown water. Her eyes scanned the words, first seeking comprehension, then slowly piecing together meaning from the cryptic lines. The message was not direct. It did not spell out names or dates, but its implications were unmistakable. It spoke of hidden alliances, whispered pacts, and forces working beneath the surface of her village. Forces that sought to manipulate, control, and silence those who would uncover the truth. The handwriting seemed alive, each stroke pressing urgency into her mind, warning her of danger far greater than she had anticipated. The cryptic nature of the message only heightened her unease. It hinted at a conspiracy that reached into places she had considered safe, into the hearts of villagers she had trusted. Patterns emerged between phrases, suggestions hidden in metaphors, lines that resonated with events she had noticed but could not explain. The paper was more than information, it was a key to a puzzle that had long been obscured, a map to dangers concealed beneath ordinary life. She felt a shiver run down her spine as realization dawned. This was not simply about the letters themselves, it was about knowledge, power, and control. Whoever had stolen them had been intent on keeping the secret, preventing her from seeing the connections that threatened to unravel the balance of the village. And yet, somehow one envelope had returned. Someone, or something, had ensured that she would have this message, knowing that her insight could activate change. Her pulse quickened as she read and reread the lines. The conspirators were careful, they had left no overt signature, no clue to their identity. Still, subtle hints suggested proximity, a phrase describing a familiar location, a word only meaningful to someone who had observed the village closely. The message was a warning and a challenge, pressing her to uncover the full truth without exposing herself prematurely. Each word carried weight, and she sensed that a single misstep could bring harm not just to her but to all who were unaware of the hidden forces at play. As dawn crept across the sky, she folded the paper carefully and placed it back in the envelope. The cryptic message had shifted something within her. She felt alert, aware, and wary. The village seemed unchanged, but now she knew better. It was a stage, a place where secrets whispered between shadows, and where vigilance alone could prevent catastrophe. The letter had given her insight, but it had also given her responsibility, the heavy burden of knowledge she could not ignore. Even before she left her home, the village seemed different. The wind carried a restless energy, brushing across rooftops and through alleys in patterns that drew her attention. She noticed subtle movements, the way a cat froze mid-step, the sway of a branch in a direction that seemed deliberate, the hushed rustle of leaves that formed a rhythm almost like a warning. Every sound, every motion, became part of an intricate language she had learned to interpret. The message from the envelope had sensitized her perception. Ordinary events now carried layered meanings, signs confirming the cryptic warning it contained. Shadows that had once been unnoticed now held significance, bending or stretching to indicate unseen observers. She walked carefully, noting each anomaly, each disturbance in the otherwise familiar rhythm of village life. Something, or someone, was watching, tracing her steps, and the natural world had begun to speak of it. The villagers themselves appeared unaware, moving through their routines with the casual oblivion of those untouched by secrets. But even in their ignorance, traces of the conspiracy manifested. Doors left slightly ajar, whispers abruptly silenced when she approached, fleeting glances from trusted neighbors. Each action suggested awareness, hidden intent, or silent complicity. The environment seemed to pulse with hidden activity, a network of subtle signs she alone could read. Birds took flight at her approach, animals shifted in unexpected directions, and even the patterns of sunlight falling through windows seemed marked. Nature itself, it seemed, had become a messenger, confirming the warnings she had read in the envelope. She began to map these signs mentally, aligning movements and sounds with the cryptic instructions hidden in the letter, revealing a lattice of evidence invisible to all but her. Her awareness grew acute. Every step was measured, every gaze scrutinized. She sensed the proximity of the person or people who had stolen the letters, felt their presence in a shadow that lingered too long, a whisper that came too close, a sudden cold that prickled her skin. The village had become a landscape of hidden signals, and her mind worked to decode them, to anticipate movements, to understand the silent intentions around her. The wind, in particular, seemed to carry knowledge, brushing against her face in currents that highlighted paths or warned of danger. She realized that vigilance was not simply about observation but about interpretation. The environment spoke, the village spoke, and even absence, the empty spaces left by those watching, communicated as loudly as any words. Every rustle, every flicker of movement confirmed that the conspiracy hinted at in the letter was real, immediate, and dangerous. By evening she had traced multiple threads of observation, noting places of unusual activity, patterns of concealment, and movements designed to remain unseen. The signs were subtle, often easily dismissed, yet together they formed a coherent message. She was being watched, her discoveries had attracted attention, and the secret carried in the envelope was a threat too great to ignore. She returned home, eyes alert and mind racing. The whispers in the wind had made one thing clear: the conspiracy was active, and her understanding of it was only beginning. The world around her was alive with signals, warnings, and hidden truths, and she would need all her wits, courage, and attention to uncover the full story before the danger could strike. The days following the return of the envelope brought a tense, restless energy to the village. She moved through familiar streets with a heightened sense of awareness, noting subtle glances that lingered a moment too long, the faint hesitation in greetings, and the way some paths seemed unusually quiet when she passed. Among the faces that had once brought comfort now lingered a shadow, a flicker of unease she could not ignore. It was old Temba, the villager she had trusted most, whose eyes now betrayed a nervous glint. His friendly demeanor seemed rehearsed, his casual smiles forced and fleeting. She remembered how he had been helpful, guiding her through village matters, and now that same familiarity felt like a mask. Every word he spoke, every gesture, seemed calculated to conceal something deeper. Her instincts sharpened. The stolen letters, the cryptic message, they had to connect to someone close, someone who could observe her without arousing suspicion. And now she feared she had found that person. She began to observe him more closely, careful not to reveal her suspicion. The way he lingered near her home, the small items that seemed misplaced around his own hut, the way his footsteps always echoed hers in the empty alleys, subtle, almost imperceptible patterns emerged. There was a rhythm to his movements, a presence that suggested he was monitoring, guiding, or perhaps even manipulating events from the shadows. Fear coiled in her chest, not the fear of violence, but the fear of betrayal, the realization that a trusted face could harbor intentions so dangerous. At night, she dreamt of the stolen letters, seeing Temba's shadow merge with the cryptic symbols on the envelope. In the dream, he appeared both near and distant, a figure whose intentions she could not fully decipher. The village she thought she knew transformed into a labyrinth of secrets, each corner hiding whispers, each doorway concealing eyes that watched silently. Her mind raced with questions. Had he taken the letters himself or merely guided others? Was he aware of the danger within the envelope, or was he a pawn of forces beyond her understanding? By day, she followed subtle signs that reinforced her growing suspicion. Temba would often be found near places she had visited, yet no one else noted his presence. Objects she had carefully stored would be slightly shifted, as if observed and inspected by hidden hands. She recognized a familiarity in these actions, patterns that suggested intimate knowledge of her habits, her movements, and now, her discoveries. Her caution grew, guiding her steps with careful deliberation. She no longer trusted the comfort of familiarity. Each friendly gesture could mask intent, each ordinary interaction could carry threat. She began to plan her actions with precision, knowing that the villager who once inspired trust could now jeopardize everything. The envelope, the cryptic message, and the evidence it carried were too important to allow betrayal, and yet identifying it required patience, observation, and courage. As the sun dipped behind the hills, shadows lengthened across the village, blending with the fear and suspicion she carried. She felt the presence of the shadowed villager even without seeing him, a reminder that danger could hide behind the most familiar faces. Each step was measured, each movement deliberate, as she prepared to uncover not only the secret within the envelope but the identity and intentions of the one who sought to conceal it. She sought her grandmother's counsel, knowing that the wisdom of those who had lived long and witnessed many hidden truths could offer guidance. The old woman listened carefully as she recounted the stolen letters, the returned envelope, the cryptic message, and the shadowed villager. Her eyes, clouded yet piercing, seemed to read both her words and her thoughts simultaneously, as though she could perceive the unseen threads connecting them all. "My child," her grandmother said, voice low and deliberate, "some secrets are not meant for ordinary hands. They carry power that can shift fates, disrupt lives, and awaken forces beyond comprehension. You have been chosen, in ways that even you may not yet understand, to bear the knowledge of what lies within that envelope. But with knowledge comes risk, and risk cannot be ignored." The weight of her grandmother's words settled over her like a mantle of shadows. She realized that the envelope, its cryptic message, and even the shadowed villager were all part of a larger pattern, one that required respect, caution, and discernment. Ordinary curiosity could not guide her here. Ordinary bravery was insufficient. She needed insight, patience, and the wisdom to interpret the unseen, qualities that had been cultivated within her bloodline for generations. Her grandmother spoke of women in their lineage who had carried burdens similar to hers, who had faced secrets too dangerous to reveal, yet had found ways to navigate them with care. They had observed, interpreted, and acted with precision, understanding that even small missteps could unleash consequences beyond measure. She reminded her granddaughter that the power of knowledge is inseparable from the responsibility it carries and that vigilance must be constant. The old woman's gaze fell upon the envelope itself, lying on the table like a quiet sentinel. "See this," she said, "not as paper alone, but as a vessel of forces older and wiser than any of us. It is alive with intention, and it has chosen you to bear witness. But remember, the danger is real. Those who would keep this secret hidden may act with cunning, and the consequences of exposure are not limited to you alone." She nodded, absorbing every word. Fear still lingered, yet it was tempered by understanding. She now saw that the shadowed villager's duplicity was not just personal betrayal, it was entangled with forces she had only begun to perceive. Every glance, every movement, every subtle interference now carried meaning within a context shaped by history, bloodline, and the power of the envelope itself. Her grandmother concluded with a final warning: "Trust your instincts, observe carefully, and honor the wisdom that flows through your veins. The letters, the message, the shadow, they are all tests of your discernment. Move with care, act with purpose, and remember that some secrets demand patience and respect above all else." The envelope's danger is not merely in what it contains, but in the awareness it awakens. Armed with this knowledge, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She understood that uncovering the secret would require more than courage, it would require insight, strategy, and vigilance. The ancestral warning echoed in her mind as she prepared to confront the shadows around her, aware that the path forward was fraught with peril, yet necessary. She had been chosen to bear witness, and with her grandmother's wisdom, she was ready to face the hidden forces seeking to obscure the truth. The village seemed familiar, yet each corner, each alley, each stone now carried hidden significance. She moved through it with a heightened sense of purpose, attuned to every sound, every flicker of movement, every whisper in the wind. The envelope had revealed a secret of unimaginable danger, a hidden pattern threading through the village and its inhabitants, and she was determined to uncover it fully. Every step was measured, every glance deliberate, for she knew that those who had stolen her letters were still watching, still maneuvering to keep the truth buried. Clues were subtle, embedded in ordinary occurrences. A swing left rocking in the wind, footprints diverging from familiar paths, faint marks etched into walls, each hinted at the forces behind the envelope's message. She traced these signs carefully, mapping them in her mind like constellations in the night sky. Some led her to abandoned huts where whispers lingered in the corners, others to shadowed groves where the rustling of leaves seemed to speak warnings. Every observation strengthened her understanding of the network of secrecy, yet each also heightened her caution. The shadowed villager loomed persistently in her awareness, a silent threat that she could sense even without seeing. She suspected that his proximity was deliberate, that he was attempting to anticipate her moves, to obstruct her discovery. She altered her patterns, moving at unpredictable hours, using paths least traveled, and watching for any sign of pursuit. The chase was not simply physical, it was mental, a careful dance of perception, intuition, and subtle deception. At night, she pored over the cryptic symbols in the envelope, comparing them to events she had witnessed, to murmurs she had overheard, to anomalies in the village's daily rhythm. Patterns began to emerge, threads connecting seemingly unrelated incidents, hints of the conspiracy that had been orchestrated behind the scenes. Every connection revealed a new layer of danger, and she felt the urgency of uncovering the truth before the forces seeking to suppress it could react. Her perseverance demanded both patience and courage. Days blurred into nights as she followed the trail, avoiding traps and misdirections. Each discovery carried weight, evidence of betrayal, whispers of dark intentions, hints of the power the secret wielded. She realized that the envelope had not simply returned to her, it had chosen her, guiding her awareness and sharpening her perception, nudging her toward revelations that might otherwise remain hidden. By the time she approached the edge of the forest that bordered the village, she had pieced together the greater truth. The secret threatened to destabilize everything the villagers had taken for granted. And yet, knowing it was not enough, she needed to confront the holder of the secret, to understand their intentions, and to ensure that the dangerous knowledge would not be misused. The chase for truth had prepared her, revealing both the peril and the path forward, and steeling her resolve for the confrontation to come. She found him at the far edge of the village, in the clearing where the ancient banyan tree stretched its roots deep into the earth. The shadowed villager stood calm, almost casual, but she sensed the tension in the air, the quiet energy that crackled between them like the promise of a storm. He held the envelope, or at least, he had touched the source of the secret it contained, and now its weight pressed upon them both. She approached steadily, aware that any misstep could provoke a reaction that might endanger not only herself but the entire village. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the world itself had paused to witness the confrontation. She spoke first, her voice measured but firm. She recounted the chain of events, the stolen letters, the envelope's return, the cryptic message, and the subtle signs that had guided her to this moment. She let each word land deliberately, forcing him to acknowledge the evidence she had gathered, the patterns she had discerned, and the inevitability of the truth he had tried to conceal. He tried to maintain composure, deflecting with carefully chosen words and feigned ignorance, but she could sense the tension beneath the surface. The message within the envelope was more than a secret. It was a lever capable of unraveling the carefully constructed facades, revealing conspiracies and challenging authority. She saw the flicker of fear in his eyes, the unintentional tremor in his hands. Every sign confirmed that the secret was powerful, dangerous, and now within her control. The confrontation was not merely a battle of words, it was a delicate negotiation of power. She revealed her understanding of the clues, tracing the connections he had hoped remained invisible. Every step, every misdirection, every attempt to obscure truth was laid bare. The forest around them seemed to lean in, shadows stretching long and murmuring through leaves, echoing the tension of their exchange. Nature itself bore witness, amplifying the gravity of the revelation. He attempted to assert control, reminding her of the potential consequences, warning her of what exposure could unleash. But she stood firm, recognizing that knowledge and courage outweighed intimidation. The village, the unsuspecting community he sought to manipulate, depended on her vigilance. She countered his threats with reason, with clarity, and with the evidence she had meticulously gathered. Slowly the balance shifted. His composure faltered as the inevitability of exposure became undeniable. By the time the confrontation ended, the secret could no longer remain hidden. Its power, though dangerous, was now tempered by her awareness and strategy. She ensured that the envelope's contents were not misused, that the conspirators' intentions were contained, and that the village would remain protected from immediate harm. The holder of the secret, once confident in concealment, now understood the weight of discovery, the consequences of deceit, and the strength of a determined spirit. As she left the clearing, the air seemed lighter, yet charged with lingering tension. The confrontation had revealed the truth, but it had also reaffirmed her responsibility. The secret was powerful, but so was she. She had navigated deception, danger, and duplicity, and in doing so had safeguarded not only the knowledge within the envelope but the balance of her village. The encounter would remain in memory, a testament to the courage, vigilance, and insight required to confront hidden threats and protect what is just. The village gathered cautiously around the central square, drawn by murmurs of unusual events and the presence of the young woman carrying the envelope. The sky above was muted, clouds hanging low as if the heavens themselves anticipated the moment. When she revealed the partial contents of the envelope, the reaction was immediate and profound. The villagers gasped, stepped back, and whispered in disbelief as truths long hidden began to surface. The message hinted at alliances formed in secrecy, plans designed to manipulate resources and influence, and intentions that had caused suffering to many without their knowledge. Even those who had once been trusted by the community were implicated in ways subtle but undeniable. The villagers' faces shifted between shock, fear, and a dawning comprehension. They realized that the forces behind the secret were not abstract or distant. They had been living among them, quietly steering events for selfish ends. It was not merely the revelation of wrongdoing that shocked them but the understanding of potential consequences. If the secret had remained concealed, its misuse could have escalated, creating danger not just for individuals but for the entire village. The envelope's cryptic words had spoken of power capable of bending people's choices, influencing decisions, and altering destinies in ways both subtle and catastrophic. She saw the weight of this knowledge reflected in their eyes, the unease that comes with recognizing one's own vulnerability to unseen forces. As she spoke, the villagers began to connect the dots themselves. Patterns of manipulation, odd coincidences, unexplained events, all had led to this moment of revelation. The danger of misusing the secret was no longer abstract. It became tangible, alive in their understanding. They realized that the cryptic power described in the envelope could have caused irreparable harm if it had fallen into the wrong hands, and yet now, carefully controlled, it illuminated the truth. Her voice, steady and deliberate, guided them through the revelation, offering not only exposure but caution. The secret's power was not something to wield recklessly. It demanded vigilance, wisdom, and discernment. Those who had once dismissed the young woman's concerns now recognized the gravity of her insight. Fear mingled with respect, and the villagers began to understand that knowledge, when concealed, could be a weapon as deadly as any sword or poison. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the square, the villagers had absorbed the partial truth. Their understanding of the envelope's power left them awed and apprehensive. They saw both the danger it contained and the potential for justice it offered. The young woman had revealed enough to prevent disaster, enough to ensure accountability, and enough to teach a lesson that would linger for generations. The secret, dangerous as it was, had found a steward capable of guarding it, interpreting it, and ensuring it did not bring ruin. The moment was heavy with meaning. The villagers returned to their homes in quiet reflection, carrying the weight of the revelation. The danger had been unveiled, the potential for harm understood, and the lesson clear. Some truths, though perilous, cannot remain hidden, and those who possess them bear a profound responsibility. The young woman had navigated deception, fear, and hidden forces to bring this understanding to light, and the village would never forget the implications of what they had witnessed. The envelope, once a simple vessel for words, had transformed into a symbol of vigilance, courage, and the peril of hidden knowledge. It was no longer merely paper sealed with wax. It had become a relic, a silent witness to the forces it contained and the truths it revealed. Its presence reminded the villagers that some secrets carried power beyond comprehension, and that those who bore such knowledge required both caution and fortitude. Even after the immediate events had settled, the envelope remained central in their awareness. Parents told their children of the strange occurrence, of the young woman who had uncovered the hidden threats and revealed the dangers without allowing them to spiral into catastrophe. Her careful stewardship of the envelope became a story of wisdom and prudence, demonstrating the importance of observation, patience, and respect for knowledge too dangerous to handle recklessly. The villagers began to view their world differently. Ordinary actions and small details now carried potential meaning, and the envelope had taught them to notice the subtle signs that often go unnoticed. Rustling leaves, shifting shadows, fleeting glances, everything could be a message, a warning, or a sign of forces at play beyond immediate perception. The envelope's legacy had changed their awareness, sharpening their senses and encouraging mindfulness in a way that would persist across generations. She, too, understood the responsibility she now carried. The envelope was both a shield and a guide, a tool to be treated with care and respect. Its contents remained powerful, capable of influencing lives if mishandled, yet it also offered insight, the capacity to reveal truth, and a means to prevent injustice and harm. The legacy was not simply about what it contained, but how it was treated, interpreted, and honored by those who recognized its significance. Over time, the envelope was placed in a secure, sacred space within the village, not hidden in secrecy but preserved with reverence. It was a reminder that knowledge could be both a weapon and a protector, depending on the intentions of the bearer. Villagers visiting the space felt a subtle weight, a quiet presence, as if the envelope itself observed, ensuring that lessons learned were never forgotten. The story of the letters, the returned envelope, and the dangerous revelation became a cornerstone of village lore. Elders spoke of it during gatherings, emphasizing vigilance, courage, and the moral responsibility that accompanies knowledge. They taught that some truths are perilous, that awareness alone can be a tool for survival, and that even when threats are hidden, careful observation and courage can illuminate paths to safety. And so the envelope's legacy endured. It was not merely a relic of a single event, but a symbol, a guide, and a warning carried forward through time. The villagers, now wiser and more attentive, carried the lesson in their hearts. Some truths demand courage, some knowledge commands respect, and even the smallest piece of evidence can reshape destinies when approached with care. The envelope, returned and preserved, had become a teacher, and through it, the village learned that vigilance and courage were essential to protect not only themselves but the fragile balance of their shared world.